I'm Gary Lyon and welcome to Access All Areas. Significant result last night at the MCG as the Hawks had their way with the Eagles. Damien Barrett joins us, as does Matthew Lloyd. And Lordo, it was pretty telling.
It was, Gary. They don't come back to the MCG, the West Coast Eagles, again for the rest of the year, Damo. They fell short in the wet. Richmond wanted it more 2 weeks ago, and every key criteria they need to win on the MCG, they lost yesterday against the Hawks.
Yeah, they did. Well, we'll delve into the Eagles in depth in a moment, but let's start with the victors, guys. Some form of order was restored with the Hawks getting back on the winning list.
Yeah, it certainly was, Damo. The players that have been under pressure, and rightfully so for the first 4 weeks, all did what we hoped they would do, or thought they would do at some stage, because they are quality players, and that is Gunston, Burgoyne, Shields, Roughhead. You know, they all got involved in this match. Bruce was the other one. And, Lord, their reputations are such that you wanted a response. I guess after 4 weeks we thought I was sitting there and wondering when it was going to come. Well, it came, and it was emphatic. Yeah,
you have to ask yourself, after the previous 2 weeks losing by 86 points in both games, have they checked out as a playing group? But Alistair Clarkson, he's as narky as we've seen, Damo. So he's not giving up. We know what he's like, Alistair Clarkson. Gary, you got to play with him, and they responded as you'd expect the Clarkson side to do.
Maybe they're too scared not to. I mean, that effort you just saw then from Cyril Rioli is the effort that he has displayed on grand final day. So we know the quality of the man, but I don't know where it's been for 4 weeks, Damo. And I think success can sometimes just dull the appetite. But the appetite was back. The question is, how long does the appetite remain?
Well, it's a question. You can obviously look at the stat sheet, Lordo, as you both have and delved into it, but forget that for the moment. What are the intangibles that this Hawthorn team is now, I suppose, produced yesterday but hadn't in the past? 4 weeks.
Not so much the Hawks, it was the Eagles from the intangible point of view. Effort, intensity and nastiness. There's nothing there from West Coast. I mean, it was a passive display at a time when they knew something was going to have to come their way.
If only there was a mental stat that came up on the stat sheet, and the West Coast Eagles fail that whenever they come on the road so many times. Just on Ben McAvoy, he's been in huge question marks on him over the last month. He dominated Nathan Vardy. That gave Tom Mitchell and the midfielders first use, which they haven't had all year, and it made it so much better for the forwards as well.
Adam Simpson's words during the week were that they were ready for it, and they would never be more ready for it. They weren't, Lloydie. No. What does that say to you about the coaching of Simpson?
Well, again, I feel like they'll make the finals, but because they've got to come here to win the big one, you rule them out and you put a cross through them.
Well, ask you. If you're the journo, the newsreader, if he says they're ready for it and they know what's coming, they can't. Either they're not listening or they're not capable.
No, and I don't think they've made any form of progress since the opening minutes of that grand final in 2015. I mean, they had an ordinary season coming off that grand final year, and now we are 5 rounds into 2017, and I think they're going backwards.
Well, let's see. They'll respond against Freo on the home dunghill. I mean, they'll be competitive, but maybe the too much damage is done. Geelong, they're a side that were going to be grouped in the same bracket as the Eagles. Well, they're separated themselves. Are they the real deal contender style?
I think they're just off at the moment, the Giants and the Adelaide Crows, but we're in April, and I just think what they're building towards. I've just got some names here: Tui, Blixarves, Duncan, Hall and Smith and Motlop have all jumped off the back of the champs. I think Menzel's having a much better year. So they're playing in a different manner. And Darcy Lang as well.
And since round 2, so rounds 2, 3, 4 and 5, they're averaging 40 points or thereabouts more in the last quarter than their opposition. I mean, that's a telling stat, isn't it?
Plus 153. It helps when you've got a bloke called Selwood who did what he's done so often. We shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't underplay it, but he is, he's cemented for all time.
Des, do you believe in what Port Adelaide had 2 years ago, where you feel you're much fitter than everyone else and you can do things in last quarters? And maybe Geelong are building a bit of that.
It can be self-fulfilling. There's no question about that. And Zach Tui, he's also been handy. Corey Enright gone, Tui came out. I'm not sure Corey Enright ever stood a mark like this. Is this a tactic, Damien? I mean, you're into this weird and wacky stuff.
It's quirky, isn't it? And what we're pointing out here is how Tui decides to man the mark with his back to the player kicking for goal. And you can see here, he's still batting here.
He's had great
success. At 100%.
He's had great success. We wonder whether or not he gets Dean Kent on this one. We wonder whether or not once it fails to work, whether he'll revert back. And Lord, I know what you would have done. You would have just sold some candy and it's made him look silly. But this was the one that broke the sequence. So it worked up till now. Zach, probably put it away.
Why not? Why? That's 4 out of 5, I guess.
Keep doing it. A more serious note is the Kangaroos.
Yeah, it is serious.
Now, they are 0-5, played in 2 prelims in a row in 2 weeks running, but it is the manner in which they've lost these games. They've been in almost every game up until the last quarter.
They have, and the games they've lost in rounds 2, 4 and 5, and you can see there against the Cats, the Bulldogs and Fremantle, 5 goals or thereabouts up and lose them all. And I want to put it to you, Lordy and Gaz, that this is a coaching issue. I mean, I know that may sound simple, but you can't hide behind this change of personnel that they've done last year, getting rid of the older players, because they're not as young as they like to make out. And Brad Scott now has had 3 games of footy with this relatively younger team that he's had, and he's losing them. And he must stop the rot at some stage, and he's not.
There's no doubt it's going to come on the coach because they're competitive, but they're not winning games. But I'll also say, Zeeble, Cunnington, Goldstein, Tarrant, Atley, these guys who have been around a long time, where do they stack up against the best leaders in of the competition? They'd fall well below those.
And those leaders you're talking about are the ones who are able to turn that board back the other way. I mean, we've spoken about Selwood, spoken about Mitchell, these guys that lift sides up and get them across the line, so that's where they're falling down as well. But agree, it is a story.
Yeah, and there was an ugly incident, wasn't there, with Heath Shaw, who we commented on Access All Areas last week for his demonstrative nature toward opposition. Clearly and dramatically overstepped the line with his use of the retard word against an opponent on the weekend. And look, it's not the worst offence that's going to happen in the course of an AFL season, but this has to be stopped out and stamped out of the game.
Well, it depends where you're coming from, and it depends what your personal experiences are in life. As I spoke to someone this morning with a special needs child, it is one of the worst offences. And we've been through it. I've been an offender from a racial point of view way back. I learnt my lesson, was able to change my language. Lordo, you've done the same, I think, throughout the course of our time. And you've got to learn to change your language when it comes to this and other really sensitive topics.
He did exactly the right thing. His apology couldn't be more sincere.
It was genuine.
It was genuine.
The broadcaster?
Yeah. I love hearing umpires explain to players certain decisions, but apart from that, I don't get a lot from what the players say. What do you reckon happens from here?
Oh, well, I'm not an advocate of banning the mic simply on the back of what Heath Shaw had said. I mean, I think you have to have an awareness that these things could happen, and when they do, let's deal with them. I think sensibly, as we have on this one, because Heath Shaw's apology came really quickly yesterday morning after the night before. And again, Lord, yes, it was genuine. But I think if you're going to have the umpires mic'd up, let's use that technology. Let's not go backwards with the technology that's available. And it is a buyer-beware situation.
And the onus is on the player. And I know people will say, oh, how can they heat of the battle? But we've spoken, you've midstream pulled yourself up.
Yeah, I was over the top of a player one day in a game, and I was going to question how hard he is as a footballer, and I was over to him and said, you, and on the spur of the moment, I stopped myself and I thought, what do I achieve out of that? Because I've got to face this player after the game, when you see him on a footy show or in the street, and I don't want to go there again. And that was about 15 years ago.
And Gaz, you've touched on it here, but your issues were well documented over the course of your career. Would you now, if you think you were starting out on your career, just remove all form of sledging if you had your time over again?
I don't think I could.
Right, OK.
But I can back myself to know where the line is.
Yeah,
and that's
even in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, well, I did. I did it in the, once it was pointed out, I had to change. So I think players can change. Hey, the Sydney Swans need to change. Talk about North Melbourne and their start to the season. They haven't won a game. The Sydney Swans, the team that played in the grand final, we know they had injuries, but their stars are struggling.
Yeah, I talk about the Swans in the past years. They always win the arm wrestle. Yeah. There's a fight on, they win it. Well, they're not winning it anymore. Luke Parker, we all love him as a player, but he's not the player he was. Kieran Jack may have just fallen off the cliff.
Do they need to make a decision on Kieran Jack? As in, does he play Neefle next week?
I think they should, throw him back to the Neefle, get his confidence back. And I look at a guy like Kurt Tippett, and I know you've been onto Kurt for a long time, and I've been a big fan of Kurt Tippett's in the past. No touches after half-time. Sam Reid, what a tease he's been. Didn't hit the scoreboard over the weekend. So too many of their senior players, when you've got kids in, are not doing enough.
One of those kids is a guy called Callum Mills, who is a NAB Rising Star. Well, have a look at this. This is just on half-time, I think it is. The time will come up in a moment. That's Josh Kennedy right next to him. That's that's Tippett behind him and Kieran Jack behind him, and there's a second-year player that's given the stern messaging. Now, that's not a shot at Joey Kennedy, who's one of the few who's having a crack, but maybe their leadership is down. And when you struggle as an older player, you can neglect that side of it as well.
Yeah, Dogs have scrounged their way to a 4-1 form line, and while some people are saying that they're not yet at top gear, They'll be taking the 4-1 scoreline that they've managed to glean out of those 5 games.
If they didn't have a premiership, we'd say this is the greatest start in the Dogs' history, almost. And the fact that they have, but they're winning ugly, is great. Not a bad draw for a reigning premier, by the way.
It's pretty handy, isn't it? You'd think it would toughen up at some stage. But I'd be glass half full with the Bulldogs, wouldn't you, Lottie?
I was part of a team that won in 2000, and we thought... I remember, Gary, you were commentating the game where we come back from behind against North Melbourne.
60-odd.
And we thought we were invincible. We could do anything. We didn't know that Brisbane were coming along.
Yeah.
So they have to get their starts better. Otherwise, they won't win it this year.
They will. Hey, I thought the Lions in that game are doing everything right. Under Chris Fagan, now I think if you're a Lions supporter, I can tick the box massively. I thought they were great. There are a couple of structural things, and this is what you're going to get if you're a Brisbane Lions supporter. You're going to have these things where, starting points at stoppages are going to be addressed, and this is one for Daniel Richards, an experienced player who's the sweeper at the back of the pack, but he was neither back nor forward. He didn't have accountability for a man, or he wasn't back in the hole where he might have been able to get a hand on this.
Yep.
And then there's one later in the game when the game was shot. They'd been in it right up until the death, this one, Lloydie, and they just forgot. They'd forgotten at this stage.
Yeah, Jake Stringer, when you watch it again, he just couldn't believe how lucky he was. Jake Stringer, look at this. He's in the forward stoppage. A dangerous forward, the Bulldogs' most dangerous forward, not one opponent on him. So
it's a minute 15 to go. Yeah. And look, that's no excuse, but they had been magnificent, the Brisbane Lions, and I tell you, their top end, their 6'5" plus talent is pretty special. I like what Chris Fagan's doing.
Yeah, we spoke to Chris Fagan yesterday, and he couldn't actually respond when he saw and was replayed this incident where a trainer ran across the mark, which you can see the scores there, guys. It's still reasonably tight with halfway through the third quarter, and then this resulted in a Bulldogs goal.
Was it Bob Murphy having a shot?
Yep.
Maybe he's a Bob Murphy 300th game.
Well, what was more significant, Lordo, was the Trainers' Union, which I thought was pretty strong.
Yeah. No solidarity.
Bulldogs guys dobbing him in, Gaz.
He's lagged. Look at him. He's lagged him.
Oh, he'd be feeling sick, that guy. But at least at the end of the day, it wasn't a one-goal game.
Yeah. Hey, Port Adelaide have been a story as well, and we were over there Friday night, had a good look at them firsthand. Lots to like about them, but these were the things that I took out of it. It was Impey, it was Pittard, it was Polak, Amon, Burn-Jones. It was their run off half-back that I loved.
Yeah, I think there's a stronger... Take this game out of it because they beat up on a very young Carlton side, but I think there's a stronger resolve about this group, and I really like it.
Yeah, harder, edgy, you reckon maybe top 4. I was watching this, those half-backs, and teams will go to work on it, and we know that because of the situation of the game, Carlton had to play numbers behind the footy, but it played in their hands. They were like... these halfbacks I'm talking about were like they were in the starters box. That's the position they were taking. They were just ready to go.
You're sold on them, aren't you, Lottie? You're not playing too much into the fact that the teams they've beaten are not going to be factoring in the September action.
I think they were in it up to their ears against the 2 best teams in the comp, and I don't think it's a strong competition this year. Yeah. I think there's maybe the Western Bulldogs and there's the Giants in Adelaide. Right. I think they can be just off the back of them.
And Adelaide's been able to reintroduce a very crucial player, Brad Crouch, who played a really good game first up with the injuries troubles he's had. And if he can finally get a crack at it, you'd think that it is only going to be better for the Crows as the season unfolds. Just look at this kid, though, mate.
You look at this kid and watch the way he goes about it. He is as hard as anyone. He's got Dangerfield qualities, which I've said many times, and he just needs a good run at it, and he will become an elite midfielder. So you throw him in, and a boy that you know well, who we're going to have a look at in a moment. Look at this tackle. Look at that from Crouch. And then you add a kid who was as highly rated through the AIS squad as any in this boy, Curtly Hampton.
I think Curtly was the first player ever signed by the Giants, so that's how highly they rated him. He was one of those players you could take to start up your football club, and I just think what they're doing is where you improve. It's not the Dangerfields and Selwoods that improve you, it's your middle tier to take you up to that level. And I think Atkins, they've found Andy Otten, who's been a big plus this year, Hampton, Riley Knight, so they're on fire at the moment.
Crouch, Hampton, inside, outside, into that side. Be afraid, very afraid. Righto. It is time for our lift hard-hitting moments. I've found one that I think's worthy of this magnificent segment, and have a look at this bump. When I saw this, I went, core blimey. Taking core, cleaning up, who that is, that young fella? Foot. But a nice fair hit.
What about this one, Gaz? Clay Smith here of the Dogs against the Lions, McStay and Robertson. All three equally courageous.
Yeah, like that. That's worthy. That's up there for sure.
Yeah, that's the way Brisbane are playing, which is great. And Joel Selwood, you've got to hit him hard to keep him down. And Dylan Robertson, he's in career best form. And watch this hit on Joel Selwood when he's not ready for it. But Joel, as we know...
Is that a free kick?
They didn't pay it, but as we know, Joel got straight back up and the Cats got home.
I only just made it that one day, mate. Yours and mine were good, not sure. Hey, good work, boys. Enjoy the footy tonight. Anzac, that was the lift hard-hitting moment. Anzac Day Eve tonight, Richmond and Melbourne, and then the big one tomorrow.
Who wins?
Demons for me and the Bombers.
Yeah, Richmond and the Bombers for mine.
You?
I'm going to go for Richmond and Essendon.
All right, thank you all for joining us on Access All Areas. Have a very good week. We'll catch you next Monday. Goodbye.